Greetings everyone, and welcome to Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work, where we find out how one man manages to keep himself busy, physically active, somewhat mentally engaged after retirement with projects. Hey, today's project? Well, it wasn't so much a project for me as it was my needing to find someone that could take care of an issue that had cropped up. We had honeybees. Let's check it out.
When the heat from the sun's feeling out of control, you gotta head to a place where the water's cold. It's just what I need, and I can't wait. I worked all week long and I need a break. It's a short little trip that you gotta make when life gets dry. When life gets too dry, baby. When life gets dry, you gotta take it to the lake. You gotta take it to the lake. Oh, yeah.
Welcome back. And yes, I said honeybees. You know, if you haven't figured it out by now, living out in the country like we do, well, there's always some sort of a new adventure brewing. One year it was wild pigs coming into the yard. Just a pig invasion every night. We got some good pork out of that one. Over the past 6 months or so, there's been a big alligator, maybe 7 or 8 feet, swinging back and forth across in front of the house, and he finally moved on. At least we haven't seen him in a while. And in the past, we've had bears in the garbage. No, I don't mean we threw bears into the garbage. I mean we've had bears getting into our garbage up at the road, just tearing into it, having a good old time eating whatever they can find. Then we have deer. Deer have a tendency to get right up on the deck and eat my wife's wildflowers. Then we have one persistent cardinal. It's a female cardinal that it's got to be the same one. For years, she's just been pecking away at the bumper on my wife's car. It's a chrome bumper, and I don't know. Her beak must be ground down to a nub by now. As much time as she spent in pecking on that metal. And there's even an escaped emu living in the preserve across the street that pops up to say hello every now and then. Well, then late last summer, I walked around back behind the garage, which is right over here, and I noticed an unwelcome humming sound. It was really more of a buzz, I guess you'd say. And with a little bit of poking around, the source became quickly quite obvious. About 12 feet up and under the garage overhang, there was a regular conga line of bees entering and exiting through a hole under a piece of trim by the soffit. We had a honeybee problem. Bees. Why do I have bees, and what do I do about it? Now, I'll admit I'm pretty well equipped for a lot of things around the property, you know, dealing with it, but honeybees, that's not one of them. Well, you know, it was late summer and it was near the end of the swarming season, and if you're not familiar with bee swarms, as I understand it, the way they work is, and hey, I'm no expert, but at least Mr. Google tells me that bees swarm to reproduce and to survive. They split their colonies into 2 colonies when it gets too crowded or too stressful. I guess it happens off and on all summer long. So this was a hive that had recently been looking for a new home, and they decided they liked ours. And to be honest, this was not the first time. There had been bees in exactly the same spot before, and I'd managed to run them off, without pesticides I might add. But I'd been warned that unless I cleaned out all the residue from the old beehive, another swarm would likely, might find it, smell it, whatever it is they do, and take up residence in the same spot at a later date. Well, they did. Well, this time, if at all possible, I was determined to do it right, which meant removing the hive without hurting it, and also removing any old or new honeycomb so there would be less chance of another swarm moving in later. But I had 2 problems. First is, I'm not a beekeeper, and I have absolutely no interest in becoming a beekeeper, so I had no idea how to handle bees. And second, well, the hive was likely under a plywood soffit about 12 feet up. There. And wow, it was not easily accessible. So I needed to find a beekeeper that was willing to put in the extra effort, and preferably for free, in return for taking the healthy hive home with them. Well, I put out a request on the local Facebook word of mouth and waited to see what would happen. In short order, I had multiple hits, with several people pointing me specifically in the direction of a local family nearby that kept bees. I contacted them and, well, they jumped at the opportunity. We scheduled the removal. Well, they showed up right on time on the afternoon that we picked and set to work. This was ladder work, double ladder work actually, and it was also a bit of guesswork as to where the bees actually were. Now, I thought maybe they were nesting underneath a metal chase used to hide some AC feed lines and return pipes. So first those metal covers were removed. Well, that would have been way too easy. No bees. Exactly where were they then? I mean, with the metal chase removed, this really left only the soffit, which made a lot more sense since there was a whole lot more room under the soffit than there was under that pipe chase. Hopefully the colony had not expanded way up into the attic. So using a cool little fiber optic camera gadget, the bee guys, they snaked the camera up into the entry hole and figured out that the bees were actually definitely under the soffit. We then peeked into the attic and just to make sure there were no honeycombs in there, they had migrated to the attic as well. There weren't. There was a rather massive rat snake there, but he seemed pretty harmless, so we left him alone. But now we were pretty confident that the bees were only in the soffit. Well, that part was good news. You can see the soffit back here behind me, and you can also see the metal chase that we had already taken off. I put it back since then. Now, in order to make this work, we would have to remove that plywood soffit somehow. And that's pretty complicated. I mean, it's actually trimmed in. You can't really see it from here. There's a lot of trim work underneath there that would have to come out first, and perhaps all those pipes as well. No, we needed to figure something out. That was way too much trouble. So time for plan B. Now this is the back of the garage, and the bees were up pretty high, and having a pretty looking flawless soffit, that it really wasn't all that important to me. So we settled on cutting out a rectangular access hole right where the hive was thought to be. Well, it worked. When the wood came off, there was the honeycomb. This whole thing sounds simple enough, but like with all projects, it's figuring out how to get to that point that seemed to take the most time. We were probably 2 hours into it at least already, and removal would now take, what, maybe another 2 hours. The next step was to catch as many bees as possible. Now, they had what amounted to a bee-friendly vacuum cleaner, and they used that to capture as many bees as they could, including, they hoped, the queen. Then, over maybe half an hour, they carefully removed each comb and secured it in frames, and they placed those into a hive box.
Well, a little bit of breeze. Yeah, a little bit of breeze.
Oh, dang. That's hey, see that on the bottom? That's a queen cup.
Is it?
That's where they made a new queen and swarmed, or they were trying to. That cup down there in the middle right there.
Okay.
If it was a real queen in it, it'd be like 1.5 inches long. Get it down there. You can wait right there. All right, you're fine. Well, hold on, back it. Pick it up, pick it up. Pick it back up.
Now, I was told that if I thoroughly cleaned the area with some Dawn and maybe some bleach, that I'd probably not have a new swarm move in the next season. Instead, I did exactly the opposite. The way I figure it, bees need a home too, and local beekeepers, well, they always need bees, right? So I replaced the plywood that had been cut out, and I framed it in such a fashion that it's just held in with 4 screws. So next season, if a new hive decides to move in, I'll call the beekeepers, and, well, they can simply remove the cover and capture the new hive. Made sense to me. So this was a win-win. The beekeepers were happy. They got a brand new hive for just a few hours of work. I was happy as they gifted us with a nice bottle of local honey. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll get another one next summer. Well, that's it. one colony of honeybees saved and another project successfully completed. And I wasn't even stung once. Can't say that for the beekeepers. Oh, as always, please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time on Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work.